I feel like customers really only want one thing. They want exactly what they want, the way they want it, and right now. That's all people are asking for. Just that, give me everything I want the way I want it.
Welcome to the Mastering E-commerce Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Eitan Koter, co-CEO of Vimy. In an era of rising acquisition costs and increased competition, this podcast is dedicated to helping you drive sales, engage customers, and build meaningful communities so you can turn passive visitors into active buyers. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on future content. Now let's get started with the episode. Hey, Rick DeLisi, welcome to the show. I'm really excited about the topic today. I know that you are kind of revolutionizing, customer experience, customer service. Welcome. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, Rick, before we dive in, what are the 3 words that are most important to you and why?
Let's go with loyalty, interactions, and psychology.
All right.
That's been what I've been studying for the last now 25 years. Man, it's scary to say it, but I've been studying this space and trying to understand more about how the psychology of interactions interacts people's future loyalty. And, isn't that the name of the game for every business? Not just attracting customers, but retaining them.
Sounds like something you can take to your personal life as well, not just business, right?
Turns out the psychology of interactions with a company are very similar to Koter.
Yeah, interesting. So tell us more about you. What do you do today?
So again, I've been studying this space for quite a while. I worked with a company called Gartner for 15 years. Now, the last 5 years, I've been with GLIA, which is the creators of the #1 interaction platform for banks and credit unions that blends AI with human interactions in a way that is ideally designed to create exactly the right interaction for the right customer at the right time. That seems more complicated in today's world, but it is surprisingly simple once you understand the psychology of why people call their bank or their credit union, or why they would go online to try to resolve a problem or an issue.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is obviously very relevant for e-commerce, for retailers who are listening to us. And I know the GLIA is, and you're spending a lot of time on research, publishing books and studies. Maybe you can share more about that.
Yeah, we just recently completed the largest ever study of contact center leaders and executives to find out more about their utilization of AI, their projected results, how they expect to achieve ROI, as well as risk factors and other mitigations, how well it's being received by customers and members, how well it's being received by the frontline staff, and helping organizations become prepared for this AI era that we're now very much in the midst of.
Interesting. What was the most surprising research finding that you can share with us today?
The vast majority of organizations right now are either using AI in some form or other, and we can talk about the different forms, or strongly considering using it in 2026. But a tiny fraction of those companies are actually measuring the results in any meaningful way, how they impact not just the economy of running a contact center, but more importantly, the impact that it has on the overall organization and the potential value that can be created by analyzing the details of every interaction a company has with its customers and members.
Interesting. Like in the last few years, everything is seems to be data driven, right? Every decision making. So you say that a lot of companies are just implementing AI, but they don't know if the investment was worth it. They don't, evaluate. They don't have some kind of a data parameters calculation on ROI. It's still in its infancy, right?
It's still in its infancy. And while there are certainly some primary ways to measure ROI, there's impact that an organization can have with all the data it has from all of its interactions with all of its customers that's going untapped. So in terms of measuring things like efficiency or how many fewer phone calls, we're getting phone calls, obviously the most costly interaction that a company could ever have. Those kinds of things are relatively easy to measure. But where we see most companies missing the opportunity is seeing how it all ties together to the strategic outcomes that the company is trying to achieve. If you think about it, if you had access to every detail of every interaction, whether that's by phone or by chat with every customer you've ever done, imagine what you could uncover in terms of trend analysis. Imagine what you could do that could be fed back to your marketing department or even your product team. Usually the contact center or sometimes more crudely called the call center, is considered more like a cost of doing business. Here's these people we have to pay to handle problems that come in from customers and members. And that's all true, but there's a huge untapped opportunity in uncovering data and insights that is embedded within your customer contact data, but that heretofore has either been really hard or impossible to mine, to discover.
And today with AI, it's like easier, or it's just those insights are much clearer, or the problem is sometimes you don't know what to ask even because this vast amount of data, right? So how these processes have been implemented or improved?
Well, I think you've really nailed it there, is that it has seemed like I don't know what to ask, or it has seemed hard to ask. Let's say, for example, somebody in an organization wanted to find out which of our new products are confusing our customers, or which of our new products are causing downstream problems for customers. How could you have done that in the past? Well, you could hire a team of analysts and do, anecdotal research by talking to frontline call center agents or tracking whatever information has come in about the calls and chats that you're engaged in. It's laborious, and you would hate to ask a question that doesn't yield any results, to ask people to do hours and hours of work only to find out there really wasn't much there. But in today's world, where all the information about every interaction is stored in a central hub, it's what we at GLIA call a channelless approach, where all elements of voice and digital and AI are all tied together into a central platform. All you have to do is literally ask a question about anything, and you'll get a response. But to your earlier point, sometimes you can ask a question that doesn't yield a result. Well, in this situation, there's no cost and there's no risk to it. And so you can feel free as a leader to ask any question you can think of, or even with AI now, open-ended questions like, name 3 things we could be doing that could be improving customer loyalty. And in about 5 seconds, you get an instant list of suggestions, many of which are likely to be worth pursuing.
Interesting. Because you mentioned the psychology aspect as well. Obviously, there is beyond the data, the insight, and the AI, there is our instincts, our experience. How do you see leaders are implementing through this analysis of data versus their experience? Maybe sometimes they think differently than what the data shows, huh?
Well, a couple of things. Yeah.
Or the way they want to implement things, which is sometimes different than what the team is recommending or what the data shows.
When you think about it from the customer's perspective, here's an interesting contrast. If you asked 100 customers, do you like interacting with bots and AI? The vast majority, something like 85 or 90% would say, no, I do not. I don't like bots. I don't like interacting with some machine. But if you ask those same people, do you like getting instant answers to simple questions? The same exact percentage would say, yes, I do. That's already a contradiction. But what we've been learning is the zeitgeist, the mood of people right now, is in many ways the opposite of what we saw with the digital revolution. And let me explain. In our book, Digital Customer Service, which I co-wrote with GLIA's CEO and co-founder, Dan McKelly, we elaborated on an idea called the A to Z phenomenon. And that is to say, the expectations that a customer has about a digital interaction with you don't really come from my experiences with your company, but rather my experiences with every company I've ever dealt with, from A to Z, from Amazon to Zappos. Meaning, if your organization isn't providing a digital experience that is as good as digitally native companies, you're already behind. Now, however, in the AI era, we're seeing the inverse of that. The expectations that people have about a virtual interaction with you or using virtual assistants don't come from experiences that they've had with you, but the terrible experiences they've had with the bots that are used by every other company. And I think it's more than fair to say most of us have had experiences where we're trying to communicate to a virtual assistant that either doesn't understand us or misinterprets us or provides an answer to a question that wasn't the question we asked, or even in the worst cases, makes up an answer called hallucinations, where the answer isn't approved by anybody and isn't even true, but the AI felt like it was forced to answer something, so it just said something. The point is, these poor experiences that people have had with other companies' inferior AI color their feelings about having a virtual interaction with you. That will change over time, but that's the obstacle that exists right now.
Interesting. And how does customer psychology shifted in the past decade when it comes to expectation for service?
I feel like customers really only want one thing. They want exactly what they want, the way they want it, and right now. That's all people are asking for. Just that, give me everything I want the way I want it. And in today's world, surprisingly, that's easy to achieve because when the system can identify the issue that a person has, the reason that they're contacting you, it can immediately determine whether or not that issue type can be instantly resolved through an interaction with a virtual assistant. Again, simple answers to routine questions. Or if it's going to require human interaction, to which point in a channelless world, that customer is seamlessly transferred to a live agent who, by the time that person says, "Hi, good to talk to you," they already know who you are because you've been logged into the system. And they already know what your issue is because of the communication you've already had with the bot. So sometimes an interaction with AI is exactly what a person needs. I give you the answer you need. Here it is immediately. Other times a human is required, but that human should always be backed up or supported or assisted by virtual assistants that help that agent do their job more efficiently and create a better experience.
Yes. And how all this is related to trust, right? And how can you create trust, in on-screen interaction?
We would say creating trust is less important than avoiding anything that erodes trust.
Yeah.
In an earlier book that I was part of writing called The Effortless Experience, Conquering the New Battleground for Customer Loyalty, what we learned is most companies try real hard to make their customers more loyal, but instead what they really ought to do is to mitigate or avoid any situation that would make a person less loyal. They're already your customers. This is sort of a trick question, but if you think about it, for any company, what percentage of your customers are loyal right now? Do you have a guess? It is a trick question.
You mean in general for the industry or for company?
Any company. What percentage of your customers are loyal right now?
I think it depends. It's like the same for all now. I don't think so. It depends on the company, right? Or if it's Apple or some other company, right?
Well, again, it's a trick question, but our answer would be 100%. 100% of your customers are loyal right now because they're your customers. The question is, are they going to continue to be loyal tomorrow and a month from now and a year from now? Because loyalty really isn't a present state consideration. It's more like a prediction of what somebody's going to do going forward into the future. They just bought your vehicle. The next time they buy a vehicle, will it be another one of yours or somebody else's? They have an account with a bank. Are they going to continue to do business with that bank, or are they going to seek other companies that they could do business with or open up other accounts? So making people more loyal really isn't the issue, but preventing them from becoming disloyal is the key to lifetime value. And the way to prevent disloyalty is to create experiences, interactions that are seamless and effortless, where the customer got exactly what they needed on their terms and instantly. Why would anyone become disloyal when you can serve them exactly the way they want to and need to be served? So mitigating disloyalty is actually a far bigger consideration for lifetime value than somehow mythically boosting value or creating loyalty.
Yes. And those AI, obviously, engines are responders, right? But they also can provide recommendations, right? How to improve trust, how to improve loyalty, correct?
Right. So now we are talking about two sides of the same coin here. There's customer-facing AI, and then there's internal-facing AI. There's fascinating developments in both areas, and I'd love to talk to you about both of them, but it helps in the conversation to separate those two.
By the way, Rick, do you see any generational differences in just expectation for customer service?
Sure. Older people in general, and now we're painting with a very broad brush here, but at a demographic level, the older a person is, the more likely they are to expect that the only kind of interaction that they want is to speak to a live person. However, again, even people who would have told you, I only want to speak to a live person, if their need is ultimately very simple, what's my balance? Did this check clear? What is your routing number? Typical everyday quotidian banking questions. If that person can get the exact response that they needed without having to speak to a live person, then that's a completely satisfactory, effortless interaction. So even people who would say, I don't like speaking to bots, are always very pleased when you can give them exactly the thing they wanted in, zero point 0.5 nanoseconds.
Yes. Yes. I think it's kind of a common experience that the first questions are both, activated, but then if it's getting more complex or deep, it's switch over to a human, right? I think this process is really acceptable now in North America.
Yes, but now that whole process has been extremely simplified and streamlined. In our book, The Effortless Experience, we learned that one of the biggest causes of unnecessary high effort or a likely experience that would create more disloyalty is when a person starts an interaction online and then has to abandon their whole digital journey and start all over again on the phone. It's annoying, it's repetitive, it feels disrespectful. I mean, think about this. If you've been online for 5 or 10 minutes and then you have to give up and call on the phone, and then the person says to you, hi, my name's Rick, how may I help you? That ultimately disrespectful, because that assumes that this is the beginning of the interaction. But to the customer, they're already well into the middle of an interaction that so far is going really poorly. So it's the system's ability to recognize what it can and can't resolve, to be able to instantly resolve those issues which it knows it can, but to immediately transfer you to a human being for the situations where human interaction is required, but that human being, that agent on the company side, isn't starting cold or from scratch. They already know who you are, and they already know what your issue type is. So rather than saying, hi, I'm Rick, how may I help you? It's a lot more like, hey, Mr. DeLisi, it looks like you're trying to apply for an auto loan. I can totally help you with that. And when you look at it that way, it's still the same exact two people. They're still resolving the same exact issue, but it's a totally different experience.
Yes. I mean, we saw so many changes even during the last year, specifically on customer support and call center, just companies just revamping their entire teams, right? How do you see the future for call centers and support centers, with the advance of, AI and technology?
What we're seeing is there's too many companies that are getting this idea that we just don't need people anymore, that AI can handle every issue. That's a gigantic and horrible mistake. And the reason that some companies are tempted to move in that direction is that it's sort of true many times, but it's not universally true. What we've discovered as you analyze the reasons that customers are contacting companies, and again, specifically in financial services for our company, something like 50% of those interactions are for routine, simple, repetitive issues that the bank has dealt with for hundreds of years. I mean, just the same exact issues over and over again. But the other 50% do require some form of human interaction. But when you have a system that automates the matching of the right interaction to the right customer at the right time, you get instant answers when you have a simple question, and you get a human being who already knows who you are when that's not the case. So we think that's the best of both worlds. So for those companies who are thinking everything can be handled by AI, they're missing the fact that something like half of all interactions either require a human being, or the customer would be far better satisfied if they had an opportunity to express their concerns and get confirmation from a human being.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And Rick, I know you prefer using the term customer loyalty rather than customer service, right? But what's the major difference?
Well, again, customer loyalty is the business of providing experiences that enable your loyal customers to remain loyal. Customer service in and of itself may or may not have any impact on the business, but customer loyalty has every impact on the business. And, coming from a marketing background, I know you know this, whatever multiple you've ever used in your life, it's 7 times more expensive to attract a new customer than to keep the customers you have, whatever multiple you use in that analysis. The number one job of companies who are interacting with customers, not prospects, but customers, is to do everything possible to enable that person to want to continue to do business with you, to want to remain loyal. Not just, okay, I'll keep doing business with you, but ideally being open to new offerings that you have, willing to consider new products as they're released, willing to make recommendations to friends and colleagues about your company. There's so many things that loyal customers can do that lead to lifetime value and can even lead to new customer acquisition. But again, The key here is they're already your customers. Let's do everything we can to make sure they remain our customers and don't go flying off to some other company the first time somebody throws a great offer in their inbox.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the digital customer service book, but you also wrote another book, The Effortless Experience, which is actually a playbook, right? So tell us more about the Effortless Experience and what this whole book is about.
Yeah, it started with a simple research question, and that is, what one question could you ask a person right after an interaction with a company that would best predict their future loyalty? So you probably know there are two traditional customer experience or customer interaction questions. One is the CSAT question, the customer satisfaction question. How satisfied were you with this interaction? That's the traditional question. We've all been asked that question a million times as customers, and that's always been the default setting. A more sophisticated question is the Net Promoter Score question, which I'm sure you're familiar with, NPS, which is based on how likely are you to recommend us to a friend or colleague. And what we learned is that neither one of those questions or the person's answer to those questions is a very good predictor of their future loyalty. So we experimented with lots of different questions and lots of different wording, and what we came up with was this question predicts a customer's loyalty better than anything else, and that is immediately following an interaction, how much effort was required for you to get what you needed? So think about the psychology of that. What's so interesting is that it's the ideal question to ask right after an interaction. So it's not a good relationship loyalty question. NPS, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend or colleague? That's a great question to ask when you're serving somebody at any time other than when they just had an interaction with you. But the effort question, how much effort was required, is very much a you question or a me question, me, the customer. Whereas the NPS question, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend or colleague? That's a question about us, the company. That's a company-centric question. How likely are you to recommend us? How dare you ask me that? I'm like, yeah, the milker next us. But again, it's a good question to assess the overall loyalty across dozens of touch points over X period of time. But what we also know is that the most likely time that a customer would become disloyal is right after a high effort interaction. And I bet we can all think of examples. I know I certainly can think of examples of situations where I had such an unpleasant high effort experience with a company that I was already a customer of, that it made me start to think, maybe I don't want to continue doing business with these guys. Or at least minimally, now I'm vulnerable to the next best offer that comes from a competitor. That's exactly what you don't want as a company. The thing you don't want is for a person to even have that notion in their mind, maybe I ought to shop around, or maybe I ought to look at what other companies are offering. For customers who are loyal, who've had continuously effortless interactions with your company, it's much less likely that they would even have that thought.
Wow, it's super interesting. Rick, thank you so much for sharing that. And so for companies who want to just transform the digital experiences, what are some of the steps that you highlight in the book?
Make it very easy for people to reach you online, but understand that there's lots of different interactions you could have with a person who comes to you online. There's chat with a bot, which can be perfect for resolving simple issues. There's chat with a human, which can be perfectly useful for just to-do list items, or help me with this one thing, or just take care of this for me. And then there's something called on-screen voice, which is having a conversation with someone, but through your own screen. So not forcing that person to have to make a phone call just to talk to a human being. So chat with a bot, chat with a person, on-screen voice with a human being, and being able to ascertain very quickly which one of those types of interactions is going to be best for this person based on the need they have or the reason that they've contacted us today. That can now be all completely automated, and that was never true before.
Got it. What are some of the mistakes you see that leaders are doing, right, while implementing their digital experiences?
One mistake we hear frequently is a lot of concern about customer-facing AI without recognizing that in many cases that might be the last step you want to take, that there's so much availability of tools and resources that can be used internally that are even that less risky, that are even more helpful to your frontline people. Think of AI as a workforce of people that you never had available to you before who are ready to do whatever you need and right now. And by the way, 24/7 without ever complaining or getting tired or taking holidays. When you think about the things that AI can be doing to assist your frontline agents, as well as managers and supervisors who work with those people, as well as the executives who those supervisors report up to, it's just astounding what kind of resources and what kind of help is available. Being able to do instant analytics about any individual interaction or all interactions or interactions of a certain type or interactions about a certain product or interactions from people who work for a certain supervisor. I mean, there's just no end to what you can analyze and see much more clearly when all you have to do is ask a question and the AI engine produces an immediate answer. Because again, it has access to every keystroke and every word that any customer has ever had with any one of your people from the time you implement it.
Yes. Yeah, you mentioned all these questions. So let's try to prioritize things. What do you think are some of the major KPIs that leaders need to just prioritize right now?
Well, one of the things that we learned from the research study is that organizations are doing a poor job of tapping into the resources and expertise of the contact center when it comes to making decisions about new products, new markets, new demographics. You can ask your system, what are the top 3 things that people ages 18 to 24 are interested in? And the system already knows that. Again, you could have hired a team of analysts to go through hundreds of records and maybe come up with something. But when you can ask any question and there's no additional cost and there's no embarrassment if what you ask doesn't yield a result, then your curiosity ought to be your primary weapon. How about if we learned about this? So thinking about specific product types, specific demographics, times of day, times of year, there's literally no end to what you can ask and get an instant answer. It's sort of like ChatGPT, except now instead of using the entire internet as the supporting database, now it's every interaction your company has had with any customer at any time.
Yeah. And obviously trying to highlight some anomalies and things that are more important for you to handle right now, right? Because they can create like a ripple effect, right, on other customers.
For example, are there certain ways that we're communicating or certain ways that we've explained features and functionality that seems confusing to people, easily detectable, easily fixable? Is there something about the words and attitude being used by our own people that could easily be adjusted in a way that feels more effortless to customers? Are there things that we're doing in the way we're introducing new products that make them less attractive than we thought they would be? What can we learn about that? Here's another thing is that most companies, when they're trying to solve various customer or product issues, go immediately to who are the people who don't like this product, or why are some people not interested in this product, or what is it about this product that is making some people feel like it's not a fit for them? Well, instead of focusing on the negative, so when it comes to behavior change, how can we change the behavior of these people who we're trying to get to do something different? One thing a lot of smart companies do is focus much more on the people who are already using that new product, or who have already implemented some new functionality, or who are already very pleased with some new thing that you've offered. What can we learn from those people? What is it about that product, and how would they even say it in their own words that we could then use to potentially attract people who would either be resistant or would have ignored an offer? So don't just focus on people who aren't doing what you want or need them to do. Focus on the people who are and see what we can learn from them.
Yes.
And I was saying, once again, when all the information about every interaction is stored in a central repository, it's just extraordinary what you can do.
Quickly launch new campaigns, use new messaging, and try to evaluate quickly. Just be very, very flexible and agile in the way you communicate. Thank you for listening to the end of this episode. If you found this episode valuable, please subscribe so you won't miss any of our future content. And if you could share this with just one person, it would make all the difference. Are you looking to accelerate your sales with the power of shoppable video? Explore Vimy, the video commerce platform that includes live shopping, shoppable video, and social commerce capabilities. Visit Vimy at www.vimy.net, that's VIMMI.net, where you can start with a free for life package. We appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more valuable insights in our next episode.